his foes for the sake of the world. FERGUS Meroic heaves himself across the battlefield, clearing waves of enemies as a saber-class servant. This walking euphemism obliterates his opponents via the hallucinogenic noble phantasm, Caloborg, a buster area of effect NP that subsequently reduces all survivors' defense by 20% and their debuff resistance by an amount that scales with overcharge. Despite being one of the game's rare free-to-play sabers, the potency of Adult Brock as a wave clearer should not be underestimated. He can easily incorporate his noble phantasm at the head of a powerful Buster Brave chain, due to a command card deck that is really more akin to a berserker rather than a traditional saber, perhaps shedding light on Fergus's more primal instincts. He further boosts his offense through an impressive first skill, Valor Rank A, which increases his attack by up to 30% for 3 turns, buffing his damage to help him pound his opponents into submission. It additionally increases his mental debuff resistance, making him more resistant to debuffs such as Charm, something that, for all his proclivities, FERGUS is remarkably resistant to. Also possessing the magic resistance rank B passive. So what of the rest of his kit? Despite his offensive focus, FERGUS's final 2 skills are in fact wholly defensive. Mind's Eye True grants him survivability in the form of a 1-turn evade and defensive boost, whilst Defiant increases his defense for 3 turns, though at the cost of reducing the success rate of any potential attack buffs by 50% for a whole 3 turns. I really don't like this. This intersection of skills can be highly useful in the early game, where FERGUS can take leading damage roles for masters who lack a varied roster of saber servants. A combination of hard-hitting offense, a solid noble phantasm, and self-sustaining defense makes him into an incredibly solid early game option. However, while they have great utility early on, these skills become largely superfluous as superior sabers are summoned to your Chaldea, and FERGUS is relegated to a farming specialist, a role that largely does not need survival tools. And while FERGUS can be impressive in his role, the same assets that help him in the early game hinder him here, constraining his potential considerably. Having 2 of his 3 skills dedicated to survivability renders FERGUS's offensive kit comparatively basic to those of his higher rarity peers, which is already compounded by the limitation of his 3-star stats. Furthermore, it also leaves him without any form of NP battery or NP gain skill, and his triple buster deck contains just 1 arts card, and even if its NP gain is somewhat decent, this leaves him largely reliant on supports. FERGUS is by no means a bad servant. On the contrary, if lacking alternatives, pairing him with supports like Merlin, Jude de Leon, William Shakespeare, or of course Maeve, can make him incredibly effective for a 3-star servant, not least owing to that triple buster deck. But the unfortunate truth is that due to a mixture of his 3-star stats, a simplistic kit that does fail to adequately focus on strengthening his offense, and his NP gain struggles, FERGUS simply cannot compete with his higher rarity peers. At this point, we could speculate on how to improve FERGUS, such as in my How to Solve a Problem series, where we look at deeply flawed servants and try and come up with some solutions. And it's certainly true, FERGUS does possess a number of flaws. But I don't believe he needs an upgrade. He's a perfectly serviceable saber, capable of helping masters in the early game before settling in nicely as a solid 3-star wave clearer. In some ways, FERGUS is the exact opposite of a 3-star superstar. He's not a specialist who exceeds his rarity by excelling in a particular niche, nor does he particularly stand out. FERGUS is a hard-hitting wave clearer who falls short compared to his higher rarity peers, and that's absolutely fine. FERGUS is a good 3-star servant, and that's really all he needs to be.